Israeli police used stun grenades to disperse protesters rallying against the government's judicial reform.
Critics say the controversial bill threatens Israeli democracy. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I am Randy Bernardino.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines.
Senate body vows to focus on economic provisions of the Constitution. House panel to conduct a probe on jeepney phase-out. Authorities file complaints against 6 suspects linked to hazing death. And G20 delegates unite for Turkey and Syria but remain divided over Russia and Ukraine.
Senators intend to prioritize amending the economic provisions of the Constitution to ease the government's policy on foreign investments and not on political gains. Mayan Corvera reports.
Politics is out of Senator Robin Hood Padilla's mind in his pursuit to amend the 1987 Constitution. During the public hearing conducted by the Senate Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revisions of Codes in Davao City, Padilla says the economic provisions of the Constitution must be revised. The move aims to relax the country's policy on foreign investment to create jobs for the people.
Ang Pilipinas po, sa mga oras na to, tayo po sa loob po ng 83 economy, 83 economies sa buong mundo. Isa po tayo sa pinakamahigpit ang foreign direct investment. Alam niyo po yon kung pang ilan po tayo? Pangatlo. Pangatlo po tayo mula po noong 90s. Sumigaw na po ang salitang globalization. Ano ba yung globalization? Ibig sabihin yung buong mundo ay nagkakaroon na ng pagninegosyo. Mga mahal kong kababayan, trade, investment. Nakakalungkot po, tayong Pilipinas, ang hilig nating sumama sa trade agreements. Binuksan natin ang bansa sa trade agreements. Pero, ang nakalulungkot, yung ating foreign investment, sarado pa rin. Di ba ho, kalokohan yun? Napakalaking kalokohan nun, mga mahal kong kababayan.
He cited reports from Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas that foreign investment fell from 2018 to 2020. Padilla says the country cannot rely on regional comprehensive partnership agreement since the effect of such accord may only be felt 10 to 15 years from now.
Kahapon lamang po, sinabi ng Bangko Sentral na ang year-on-year inflation ay papalo mula sa 8.5% hanggang 9% o higit doble sa inaasahan ng gobyerno.
Padilla also insists that the Constituent Assembly or CONAS should be the mode to consider in amending the economic provisions of the Constitution because the process will be faster compared to the tedious Constitutional Convention which is long and costly.
Ako po talaga, kahit na ako'y pigain ninyo, ang kakatas po sa akin talaga, kon-kon. Yan po talaga ang gusto ko. Kaya lang, ipinipilit ko po na makumbinsi ang ating mga kababayan at ibang mambabatas na CONAS sapagkat pag sa CONCON, mabubuksan ng buong konstitusyon. Pagka nabuksan po ang buong konstitusyon, maraming mababago kasama na po ang political structure.
But Attorney Yula Pertubos Arias of Jose Maria College of Law believes that CONCON is more appropriate as a mode to change the Constitution because it will give Filipinos the chance to participate by electing delegates to revise the law.
If we opt for CONAS, let's just make sure that it will be transparent to the people. Because at the end of the day, yun naman po talaga ang importante, that the people knows, that the people are aware, and all what's happening during the proposal, the people has transparent ang government when it comes to proposing the amendments. So yun, I think the CONAS, of course, it is doable, and it's a lot faster, kumbaga. But on the other side of the spectrum, let's say, it's one of the most historic. This will become a big part of our history. So people's participation is really essential.
National Economic and Development Authority earlier says CONCON could cost the government 28 billion pesos, but the amount can be lowered if the plebiscite for the delegates will be conducted along with the barangay and sangguniang kabataan elections. In CONAS, the process could cost 13.8 billion pesos for a separate election, while 30 million pesos will be used if it will be held along the BSKE. Padillas Committee is expected to hold 2 more public hearings in Luzon and Visayas. Mayan Corvera for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Congress cannot guarantee that political provisions of the 1987 Constitution would not be subjected to the proposed amendments of the fundamental law. House Committee on Constitutional Amendments Chairman and Cagayan de Oro Representative Rufus Rodriguez says no one can control delegates of the proposed Constitutional Convention or CONCON if they decide to touch on the political provisions. Rodriguez emphasizes, however, that Joint House Resolution Number 6 clearly states that amendments to the Constitution will strictly focus on economic provisions. Both chambers are hopeful that CONCON delegates will follow what is stated in the resolution. Under the lower house's version, Congress proposed a hybrid CONCON with 51 delegates to be elected representing the 17 regions of the country and 20% appointed delegates from various sectors of society.
The Marcos administration has allotted a 4 billion peso fuel subsidy for drivers, farmers, and fisher folk. To tell us more, here's Eden Santos.
The Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, has allotted 4 billion pesos as a fuel subsidy for the public transport and agriculture sectors. Budget Secretary Amina Pangandaman says the direction came from President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The administration will continue providing fuel subsidies, especially to the most vulnerable sectors. The funding will be sourced from the Department of Transportation and the Department of Agriculture, or DA, under the 2023 General Appropriations Act. 3 billion pesos will be distributed to qualified beneficiaries including taxi and tricycle drivers, full-time ride-hailing and delivery service drivers through fuel vouchers. The DBM chief says the allocation is 5 million pesos higher compared to the 2.5 billion pesos distributed in 2022 under the fuel subsidy program, which aims to alleviate the effects of higher fuel prices to public utility vehicle or PUV drivers. Meanwhile, 1 billion pesos will be given as fuel assistance to farmers and fisher folk. More than 312,000 farmers and fisher folk will benefit from the fuel assistance. Each of them will receive 3,000 pesos to ensure that their agricultural production and fishing operations will continue. Eden Santos for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The House of Representatives will look into government plans regarding the phasing out of the country's traditional jeepneys. Nadine Aguilar tells us more.
The House of Representatives will probe the possible effects of the government plan for public utility vehicle or PUV modernization, which will pave way for the phase-out of traditional jeepneys. Albay Representative Joey Salceda proposes House Resolution 801, directing the House Committee on Transportation to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation to discuss the adverse socio-economic impact of the traditional jeepney phase-out. The phase-out is mandated under Memorandum Circular Number 2023-13, issued by the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board, or LTFRB. Salceda, also chairman of the House and Ways Committee, says the phase-out of traditional jeepneys seems to ignore the reality that the public utility jeepney remains the primary mode of public transportation, especially in provinces. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, Salceda says revenue loss of jeepney operators and drivers reached 102 billion pesos due to the series of lockdowns, and they have not recovered until now. With a phase-out of traditional jeepneys, almost 11.5 million passengers may be affected daily. This would mean accessing other transportation like the congested railway system, limited transport network vehicle service system or TNVS, and private vehicles including motorcycles. The Albay congressman warns that if the traditional jeepney phase-out pushes through, private vehicles would ply the roads, resulting in serious road congestion and traffic problems. Salceda describes the plan as cruel and inhumane, without enough support or help from the government. Nadine Aguilar, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
A commuter protection group appeals to the transport sector to rethink its plans for the week-long strike scheduled for next week. Paulo Ramos reports.
The Lawyers for Commuters Safety and Protection, or LCSP, calls on the transport sector to reconsider its week-long strike set to begin on Monday. In an interview with Net25's Ano sa Palagay Nyo, Attorney Ariel Inton of LCSP says the transport group could push for their grievances against Public Utility Vehicle or PUV modernization program without causing trouble to the public. Despite Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board or LTFRB's extension of traditional jeepney franchising until December 31, Mar Valbuena, chairman of the transport group Manibela, says they will push through with a week-long transport strike. Instead of a strike, Inton encourages Valbuena to engage in a dialogue offered by LTFRB and the Department of Transportation or DOTR.
Siguro maaari nilang ituloy yung laban nang hindi po maapektuhan ang kanilang hanap buhay at ang mga mananakay. If they want, pwede silang magkaroon ng mass action, no? Kasi ultimately ang maapektuhan po ng sikil pasada ay yung mga pasahero.
Attorney Inton notes that some PUV franchise owners are wary to join cooperatives or a corporation to consolidate franchises as mandated by the law. The lawyer hints that the government should review the law, especially if the franchise owner is capable of upgrading his unit. He also questions why the modernization is limited to minibuses imported from other countries when the jeepney unit could be upgraded and comply with the standards set by the government.
At marami po kasing individual franchise holder ng mga jeepney operator na masakit sa kanila na mawala yung prangkisa nila at mapunta po sa isang korporasyon at kooperatiba na i-form. Kasi po, ganito, no? Bigyan ko po kayo ng halimbawa. Sa isang rota, mayroon 50 operator dyan o jeepney driver na nagsaserve ng isang route. Ang polisiya kasi one application per one route. So, sila magpo-form sila ng co-op, kooperatiba, or corporation. Malimit dyan, away-away sila dyan. No? Oo. Dahil, siyempre, kung sino mamumuno, meron ng politika dyan. Ngayon, yung mga ayaw sumali doon, no? Dahil ayaw nila yung pamamalakad yung kanilang presidente o chairman ng kanilang co-op, no? Wala silang, kumbaga, nahihirapan sila o ayaw nilang sumali doon, doon nagkakaroon na ng problema.
Paulo Ramos for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Police have formally filed complaints with the Department of Justice of 6 suspects in the death of Adamson University student John Matthew Salilig, charged with violations of the anti-hazing law. The suspects are Tung Cheng Teng Jr., who is said to be the leader of the Tau Gamma Phi Adamson chapter, Romero Earl Anthony, Jerome Balot, Sandro Victorino, Michael Lambert Ritalde, and Mark Pedrosa. The victim's brother, John Michael, and a witness victim who pointed to the suspects are standing as complainants. The suspects were in handcuffs and were strictly guarded by the SWAT as they were brought to the DOJ on Thursday morning. The police first invited the 6 to the police station after another alleged hazing victim pointed out that they were among those who beat Salalig. At noon, police also presented another man who is said to be the father of one of the suspects who owned the vehicle allegedly used to transport the victim. The complaint was filed after police were prevented from serving search warrants to seize the son's SUV. Salalig was reported missing on February 20, and his body was found in a vacant lot in Imus, Cavite on February 28. The DOJ has set a preliminary investigation into the case against the 6 frat men for March 10, with the hopes of filing a counter-narrative. The 6 will remain in the custody of Binyan City Police while the complaint is heard against the respondents. Binyan City Police Chief Virgilia Hopia further revealed that one of the 6 suspects had submitted an extrajudicial confession. The court will decide whether the suspect will be a state witness. The police are still looking for 10 people of interest in the case. Hopia also confirmed that Tau Gamma Phi's master initiator had resigned on Thursday. Police are confident that they have a strong case against the suspects in the death of Salilig.
The Commission on Human Rights, or CHR, is conducting a separate probe on the deadly hazing of John Matthew Salilig. In a statement, the CHR calls on law enforcement agencies, higher education institutions, and other concerned agencies for urgent and steady action on the case. 24-year-old Salilig was a chemical engineering student of Adamson University. He was reportedly missing but was killed in a fraternity hazing and was buried for 10 days in a pit in Imus, Cavite. The CHR vehemently decries the death of Salilig, adding that the tragedy should have never happened. The Commission stresses that Salilig's death is a clear violation of human rights and a failure of those responsible for his safety and welfare. CHR says hazing is a ritualistic act of humiliation and degradation, which goes against the basic principles of fundamental rights and human dignity. It adds that hazing's serious consequences against the physical, emotional, and mental well-being of individuals, especially minors, has no place in academic institutions. CHR reiterates its call for the stronger implementation of Republic Act 11053 or the Anti-Hazing Act of 2018. The Commission extends its condolences to the victim's family and calls for justice to be served.
In other news, 3 out of the 4 victims of the Cessna plane that crashed within the vicinity of Mayon volcano last month have been retrieved. Responders are still working on the retrieval of the last victim. In a social media post, Camalig Albay Mayor Carlos Erwin Baldo Jr. says the 3 victims were retrieved by emergency responders. The retrieval operations lasted for 12 days due to Mayon's rough terrain and bad weather. Mayor Baldo says the 3 bodies were brought to the base of Mayon in Barangay Antolin. The first body was dropped off Wednesday night, followed by the second body an hour later, and the third body around 2 hours later. Later in the news, Vietnam Parliament confirms Vo Van Thuong as new president. G20 delegates unite for Turkey and Syria victims. And German residents protest against NATO support to Ukraine. Mata ng Agila International will be back after a short break.
Tama na, may nanalo na. Uwi na. Cajun Seafood!
Hi mga ka-netizens! Ako po si Yo Andrada ng Anong Meron Kay Abok at Quezon City. For more live and updates, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment sa Net25 TV.
Let's get together sa Net25.
Give peace a chance. As our cultures advance, many interests are expected to clash. Mostly it's driven by the desire to dominate that causes these conflicts. And so it is laudable when individuals or institutions make it their life's mission to propagate peace through their actions. In this episode, let's celebrate the Peace Laureates recognized by the Sinophil Asia International Peace Awards.
I always have this little voice in my little heart when I was a teenager. Peace is always what I yearn for.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis says human error is to blame for a deadly rail accident in Greece that has claimed at least 43 lives. A passenger train with 350 people on board collided head-on with a freight train overnight Wednesday. What you see here is CCTV footage that captured the tragic moments when the two trains collided. Trains on this line travel at speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour. The resulting inferno drove up temperatures in the rail cars that caught fire to nearly 2,000 degrees Celsius. Police have arrested the 59-year-old station master of Larissa, charging him with negligent homicide. Unions say the station master is a likely scapegoat. The accident happened on a route that union officials say has been plagued with safety shortcomings. In an open letter last month, rail employees warned the track safety systems were incomplete and poorly maintained. The country's health minister says most of the passengers were students returning from a long holiday weekend. At least 85 people suffered injuries, some of them critical. The death toll is expected to rise as many people are still missing. About 150 firefighters and 40 ambulances responded to the scene. One rescue worker says bodies were still being found 5 hours after the accident. The government has declared 3 days of national mourning.
Vietnam's National Assembly has elected and confirmed Vo Van Thuong as the country's new president. According to the parliament's online portal, Thuong was elected with 98.38% of the votes. Authoritarian Vietnam is run by the party, which is officially led by the General Secretary, President, and Prime Minister. Thuong's appointment comes after the sudden dismissal of his predecessor, Win Chuan-Phuc, in January. The ruling Communist Party blamed Phuc for violations and wrongdoings of officials under his control. In his first speech as the new president, Thuong said he will resolutely continue the fight against corruption. He is the youngest member of Vietnam's top decision-making body. But Thuong is considered by many as a veteran since he started his political career at a young age.
Nigeria has a new president. 70-year-old Bola Tinubu has been declared the winner of Saturday's presidential election. Tinubu called on his rivals to unite with him.
We must join hands in this common endeavor to pull the nation through. In a phrase, I'm asking you to work with me. I may be the president in an election, but I need you more importantly. Nigeria needs you a lot more.
Opposition parties are looking to challenge the vote, saying it was tainted with fraud. With President Muhammadu Buhari stepping down in May after 2 terms, many Nigerians had hoped the election would produce a leader capable of tackling growing insecurity, economic problems, and poverty.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan ruled out any delay in elections after the devastating quake in Turkey, saying the vote would push through on May 14 as planned. After the massive quake, people in Turkey mounted speculation on whether the polls would be open because Erdogan could remain in power until 2028. But Erdogan told his ruling party lawmakers that the Turkish people will do what is necessary on May 14. A delegation from Turkey's higher election board started a mission on Monday to the quake zone to report on the voter situation and election security. Erdogan's government has come under fire from failing to deploy sufficient humanitarian aid and relief teams, as survivors in several provinces had to pull out people with their bare hands. Erdogan has acknowledged some shortcomings immediately after the disaster, but blamed severe weather conditions and damaged roads.
World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus urges the international community to help earthquake victims of Syria. Tedros asserts Syria needs the assistance of the international community to recover and to rebuild. He also pleads to leaders on both sides of the Syrian conflict to use the shared suffering of this crisis as a platform for peace.
Even before the earthquake, needs were increasing while international aid was decreasing. But we must not close our eyes or turn our backs on the Syrian people. We cannot let this be a forgotten crisis.
Delegates hold a minute of silence at the G20 meeting to pay tribute to Turkey and Syria quake victims. However, the issue of the war in Ukraine seems to dominate the meeting of the world's top diplomats in New Delhi. To avoid the discord, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls on his G20 counterparts to bridge differences over Ukraine.
The G20 has a critical role to play in finding the right balance between growth and efficiency on one hand and resilience on the other. We can reach this balance more easily by working together. That is why your meeting is important.
But the calm ends as the ministerial meeting proceeds to talk about the Ukraine invasion. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken insists he had no plans to convene with his Russian or Chinese counterparts. But he asserts if Moscow is ready to engage in diplomacy to end the aggression, the U.S. is the first to initiate the work. He notes there's zero evidence that Russia has made the effort. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz echoes Blinken's sentiments, saying Russian President Vladimir Putin is not ready for peace talks. Meanwhile, Russia and China claim the West is interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang point out the West is using blackmail to oppose the democratization of international relations.
While meeting with his Venezuelan counterpart, Russian Security Chief Nikolai Patrushev says that the U.S. is pressuring Moscow's international allies to sever relations with them. The council head states there that U.S. will do whatever is needed to drive nations to cut ties with Moscow. He says that it is a way to unipolar world order preservation. He also argues that all independent states are forced to choose whether to defend their sovereignty or to submit to the dictation of the U.S.
For months, Ukrainian and Russian forces have been fighting in the area of Bakhmut. Ukrainian units of the 18th Military Aviation Brigade flies out Mi-17 helicopters to monitor the region. Helicopters play a vital role in Kyiv. They are used to evacuate the wounded and dead and provide air support to troops on the ground. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Bakhmut is the hottest spot on the entire front line. Since Russia's 4 Ukrainian regions, Kyiv has continued a counter-offensive attack to retake control of these lands.
Russian forces say Ukrainian troops can precisely target Moscow artillery, but Kremlin military continues to push Kyiv soldiers away from the Donbas front line. Our RT correspondent Igor Zhdanov tells us more.
The front in the Lugansk Republic presents the ultimate challenge in military maths. Icy country roads turn to swampy mud and freeze again in a span of hours. Lowlands are covered with fog. Downpours and snowfalls impede visibility, paralyzing the work of spotters and anti-tank crews. All this and more has to be factored into the gargantuan equation by both sides, Russia planning its advance and Ukraine holding defensive lines. These Grad rocket launchers can hit targets up to 40 kilometers away. Not only does this range provide relative safety, but also flexibility in picking the best firing position with the best conditions.
These Grad crews, well, they make an immediate escape. Very often here in the Donbas, everything that separates you between life and death is just minutes. Ukrainian forces can be very precise and very quick with return fire.
Even with drone cameras blinded by weather, Russia's command centers pack plenty of intelligence data. The front line is vast, but there's only a handful of places where Kyiv forces have developed a habit of masking their equipment.
We work intensively. We have multiple goals. We constantly push the enemy. We're satisfied with our results. We hit both infantry and Ukrainian military equipment.
Russia has amassed a powerful fire fist here and is now probing Ukraine's defenses. Kyiv troops in turn scatter their perimeters with hundreds of mines. A clear sign that they've abandoned hopes they once cherished to deal another blow to the Russian army here. I'm Igor Zhdanov reporting from the Donbas, RT.
Emotions are high when pro-Ukrainian activists and Germans clash on the street over a war memento. Pro-Kyiv organizers installed a captured, burnt-out Kremlin tank in front of the Russian embassy in Germany. But Berlin residents turned the installation into a memorial. The demonstrators also protest against Germany and NATO's decision to supply weapons to Ukraine. Pro-Ukrainian activists tried to clear off the roses. Despite these efforts, Berliners continue to place flowers on the site.
Wir wollen nicht, dass mit deutschen Panzern auf die Urenkel jener russischen Frauen und Männer geschossen wird, deren Urgroßeltern tatsächlich von der Mehrmacht auf bestialische Weise millionenfach sie ermordet wurden. Wir wollen nicht, dass auf deren Urenkel wieder geschossen wird mit deutschen Waffen. Auch deshalb sind wir hier, weil das ist wirklich völlig geschichtsvergessen. Haben die denn überhaupt nicht mehr im Kopf, was deutsche Geschichte mal war?
Up next, former POTUS Donald Trump beats U.S. President Joe Biden in presidential polls. Iranian president launches probe into poisoning at girls' schools. And Israel mulls the death penalty for terrorist killings. We will continue with more global news here on Mata ng Agila International. Please don't go away.
Bilang buena manong handog, yung host po muna ang i-reality check natin. Ang dalawa nating guest ang mag-hot seat sa akin.
Oy, congrats to.
Thank you.
Bago mong show, bago mong bahay.
Malayo na rin ang narating natin tatlo.
Oy, nakarating tayo na 25.
Ako po ang magiging katuwang ninyo para mas maunawaan ang pinagdadaanan ng ating bayan.
Bantay ka ng bayan.
Gano'n na nga.
Ayun na nga eh. Napakaraming magagandang batas. Ang problema, yung pagpapatupad.
Execution.
Bantayan mo rin to. Bakit? Ano ka daw ako?
Kailangan i-check natin yung reality, kung sino ka talaga. Yun ang importante sa pilot show na to.
Ang real talk ng bayan. Panalo tayo pag together. Walang talo pag together. Let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
Pero ba gagawin natin dito kung ayaw talaga mag-start?
Isa ako sa top-notcher estudyante ng Motor Vehicle Engineering sa Stanford.
Nag-aral ka sa Stanford?
Mag-iingat ka. Maraming traitor ngayon.
Traitor?
Oo, pagkaharap ka, kaibigan mo. Pag nakatalikod ka na, crush ka.
I feel different. Very good, different. Parang may magandang mangyayari ngayon, ha?
Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko meets with Chinese President Xi Jinping and senior diplomat Li Zhanshu in Beijing. This is part of Lukashenko's three-day trip that started on Tuesday. He throws his support behind China's position on all sensitive issues, including Xinjiang, the South China Sea, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Lukashenko also plays up bilateral ties between Belarus and China during the meeting by stressing that the regime's internal politics are essentially similar. Meanwhile, China says it firmly opposes the approval of the U.S. sale to Taiwan of $619 million worth of munitions for F-16 fighter jets. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said in a statement that the selling to Taiwan seriously violates the One China principle and the Three China-U.S. joint communiques. Beijing said it will take resolute and forceful measures to defend its sovereignty. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department says that the sale is consistent with the Taiwan Relations Act and Washington's One China policy, which accepts that there is only one state called China.
A new poll shows former POTUS Donald Trump beating U.S. President Joe Biden in a hypothetical 2024 race. 46% of the participants say they want Trump over Biden. 43% of respondents favor Biden over Haley. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis trailed behind in the polls.
In the U.S., the drug xylazine, meant for use in animals, has been detected in overdose deaths in humans. The country's Food and Drug authorities moved to restrict illegal entry of the drug amid growing public health concerns. In Washington, D.C., Rosel Feria files this report.
Amid a growing public health concern, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration says it has taken action to restrict the unlawful entry of xylazine. Xylazine is a drug used in veterinary medicine as a sedative with analgesic and muscle relaxant properties. It is used on many different animal species. It is also used to relieve pain or act as a local anesthetic on animals. The FDA says xylazine has increasingly been found in illicit drugs. It has been detected in overdose deaths. The FDA says the drug is not safe for use in people. It may cause serious and life-threatening side effects. It has been identified as a contaminant found in combination with opioids, such as illicit fentanyl, and in combination with other illicit products that contain stimulants. Stimulants such as methamphetamine and cocaine. People who use illicit drugs may not be aware of the presence of xylazine. While xylazine is not an opioid, it is dangerous. It can depress breathing, blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature to critical levels. The FDA also warns that people who inject drugs containing xylazine can develop severe skin wounds and patches of dead and rotting tissue. This can easily become infected and, if left untreated, may lead to amputation. These wounds can develop in area of the body away from the injection site and may become life-threatening. From Washington, D.C., Rosel Feria for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Now, there is good news for millions of insulin-dependent Americans living with diabetes. U.S. pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly is cutting the price of the drug by 70%. For years, the price of the life-saving medicine has been soaring. Now, beginning May 1st, Eli Lilly says it will drop the price of its non-branded insulin to $25 a vial. It will also lower the price of Humulin by 70% starting sometime in October. U.S. President Joe Biden hails the move as progress. He says it costs less than $10 to make a vial of insulin, but Americans are sometimes forced to pay as much as $300 for it. Biden says it's time for other manufacturers to follow, and he would like to see insulin costs for all patients capped at $35 a month. Presently, the cap applies only to Medicare patients. According to a 2022 study, diabetes is one of the fastest-growing chronic diseases globally.
Former UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock denied all claims that he rejected expert advice on COVID tests for people going into care homes when the pandemic began. WhatsApp messages leaked to the Daily Telegraph newspaper suggest Hancock was told in April 2020 there should be testing of all going into care homes. But leaked texts suggest that he rejected the guidance and introduced mandatory COVID testing only for hospital leavers. Hancock hit back at these claims, saying it is an outrageous, distorted account. A spokesman for Hancock says the messages had been doctored.
To Iran now, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi has launched an investigation into a spate of poisonings at girls' schools in the country. Raisi assigned Iran's interior minister to provide continuous information on the probe after more than 100 students had to be taken to hospital this week. The illness have sparked protests outside schools in Tehran and Ardabil. Demonstrators chanted slogans against Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Hundreds of cases of respiratory distress have been reported among schoolgirls in the last 3 months. One government official suggests that could be an attempt to force the closure of girls' schools in the Islamic Republic. Media reports say at least 10 girls had been targeted in the latest suspected attacks. The incidents forced the hospitalization of 108 students. All are reported in stable condition. The Fars news agency reports that students at one high school in Tehran had been exposed to a toxic spray. The agency attributes the story to parents but provides no further details. The poisonings have provoked a wave of anger across the country. Critics are denouncing official silence in the face of the growing number of schools being targeted.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recalls the horrific terrorist attack of August 2003 against Baghdad's Canal Hotel. Guterres calls for trust in the Gulf region.
It is my deep belief that it is important to establish a meaningful dialogue including all the 8 countries that surround this Gulf that some call Arabian Gulf, others call Persian Gulf, which shows that sometimes it's not always easy to find common ground. But it's essential to create mechanisms of dialogue. I do believe that trust is missing. It's important to rebuild trust.
Following a drawn-out political crisis in the war-torn country, Guterres urges Iraq to break cycles of instability and fragility. The UN chief's visit comes as Iraq, blighted by corruption and broken infrastructure, prepares to mark the 20th anniversary of the US-led invasion. That invasion toppled longtime dictator Saddam Hussein. Guterres says he wants to demonstrate solidarity with Iraq in the consolidation of its democratic institutions and advancing peace.
Police in Israel cracked down on demonstrators opposed to judicial reforms being considered by parliament. In Tel Aviv, protesters blocked some streets, sparking a sharp response from authorities. Police used stun grenades, water cannons, and officers on horseback to disperse the crowds. 11 protesters ended up in hospital. Police arrested 39 others. Critics of the legislation say it threatens democracy. The reforms would give lawmakers the power to overturn Supreme Court decisions with a simple majority. They would also have more say in the appointment of judges. Meanwhile, protesters staged similar demonstrations in Jerusalem. Thousands of people rallied outside Netanyahu's residence. Several people have been arrested after demonstrators clashed with police.
Israel has taken another step to implementing the death penalty. The punishment is intended for people convicted of killing Israeli citizens out of racism or hatred of their group. The country's Ministerial Committee for Legislation has backed the proposal. The plan is part of a coalition agreement between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and an extreme right political partner. Israel abolished capital punishment for murder in 1954, but it can still be used for those convicted of war crimes, treason, genocide, and crimes against the Jewish people. The last time the death penalty was used in Israel was in 1962. That's when Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann was hanged. There's no assurance this latest bill will be passed. Members of ultra-Orthodox coalition parties are expected to vote against it for religious reasons.
Back in Philippines now, the oil spill caused by the shrinking of an oil tanker in Oriental Mindoro could affect 21 marine protected areas. In a statement, the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, or DENR, has created a task force to address the situation. Government authorities are rushing to prevent the spread of the oil spill from MT Princess Empress, which sank in the ocean of Oriental Mindoro. The vessel was carrying 800,000 liters of industrial fuel when it sank. In its report, the Biodiversity Management Bureau of the DENR says the oil spill could affect locally managed protected areas, including seagrass beds, mangroves, and fish spawning. The Philippine Coast Guard has installed spill booms to guard the marine protected areas.
Coming right up, Elon Musk regains title as richest man. SpaceX Dragon crew blasts off for ISS. And new ways of visual art stun artists in Washington. Catch more news when Matanang Agila International returns.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Thanks to Tesla's booming stock price, Elon Musk has regained his position as the world's richest man with a net worth of, can you believe this, $187.1 billion. He regained the title from Bernard Arnault of luxury goods company LVMH, who's now second richest with a net worth of $185.3 billion. Musk's wealth has been boosted as shares in Tesla have nearly doubled since the start of 2023. Musk's worth in recent years has largely been pinned to the value of Tesla, which skyrocketed during the pandemic as the company became profitable, but suffered last year in part due to concerns over production.
A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched off on Thursday to the International Space Station, or ISS. The SpaceX Dragon Crew 6 mission lasted at 12:34 a.m. from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Dubbed as Endeavour, the crew is scheduled to dock with the ISS on Friday after a 24-hour voyage. NASA's Stephen Bowen and Warren Hoburg, Russia's Andrei Fedyaev, and Sultan Al Neyadi of the United Arab Emirates are to spend 6 months on the orbiting station. Space has remained a rare venture of cooperation between Russia and the U.S. Bowen said politics rarely come up while in space. He added they are focused on the space mission itself.
We're now at T+30.
In Washington, D.C., works of 3 Korean artists are on display at the U.S. Capitol. The exhibit explains how today's non-face-to-face interaction is the norm. Arlene Ocampo reports.
The Korean Cultural Center, Washington, D.C., presents a new group exhibition called Placeless Places. This features the works of 3 contemporary artists, Choi Eun-ji, Yoo Sung-hee, and So Won-woo. Their artworks display visual art from Korea, exploring the new ways in which we experience a sense of place, or a lack thereof, a place where non-face-to-face activities are the norm. These artists created a post-pandemic update to a familiar concept of the 20th century, placelessness. Choi Eun-ji creates artworks reflecting her own experience of placelessness. She refigures industrialized urban landscapes portrayed with a vivid digital image-inspired use of acrylics. Yoo Sung-hee's works focus on the prevalent experience of people in online settings. She uses thin wooden panels as her medium, which reflects the weighty but light facet of the human condition. Her use of pastel colors emphasizes the cynical mood similar to that of a tragic fairy tale. So Won-woo portrays his art with abandoned lots and redevelopment sites with almost no human interaction. Thus, placeless places. They evoke a feeling of absence through an unconventional use of traditional oil on canvas. People in his works cannot be identified, and they are all shown from the back. This approach increases the sense of detachment experienced in these places. The majority of the pieces featured in the exhibit are created recently with the emergence of the pandemic. These display of artwork aims to start conversation on the importance of places to people and how we relate to them in a newly shifted world. Placeless Places will be on display until March 29, 2023. Visit washingtondc.korean-culture.org for more details. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Arlene Ocampo from Atanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
How is it already Thursday?
Yes.
To help you go through this week, here's a quote from William Feather, an American writer. One way to get the most out of life is to look upon it as an adventure.
And just like an adventure, there are ups and downs, accomplishments and failures. So you really have to go through all of those things.
Exactly, with fun in mind every single time. You have to have fun. That's why they are called adventures.
Yes. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Randy Bernardino.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.